The DNC, particularly Hillary Clinton's campaign manager, tells us that experts have told the DNC that it was the Russians. They have not named these experts yet?
Well, I was under the impression that the FBI has also confirmed that. So, and I would imagine that the FBI
and
would not release those names.
And they've produced evidence to show that the Russian government was involved?
They said that came through Russian servers. They didn't say the Russian government. Well, that's still to be seen, but one has to ask.
Okay.
And
let me just get to what you were saying earlier on about equality, justice, and freedom. Abdel Bari Atwan, when people in the Middle East hear these words, do they think America?
No, they don't believe America at all. I believe, the people actually lost trust in the United States. They believe, actually, they let them down. They were actually behind the destruction which took place on the Middle East when they invaded Iraq. And also, many people believe that Daesh or the Islamic State is actually the invention of the United States because this is the outcome of the invasion of Iraq and, the dissolvement of the Republican Guards of Saddam Hussein and the Iraqi army. So people actually mistrust the United States. They don't believe they are honest. And even the Syrian opposition who actually were completely dependent on the United States to intervene under the banner of human rights and democracy and freedom of expression to save them from the dictator regime in Syria. They believed that, the American actually let them down. They did not intervene. Russia now is the winning party in that part of the world, and they have, the upper hand. So I believe Hillary Clinton will have a huge task to repair the American image in the Middle East. Whether she will succeed or not, it will depend on her foreign policy in that part of the world.
Right.
But honestly, I believe, the American losing a lot completely. They managed to gain some when Obama took place, actually, when took power. But now, after the deterioration of the American image in Syria and in Iraq, I believe she has a huge challenges in her waiting for her.
Okay, Tian Wei, as you pointed out, Hillary Clinton also referred to China in her speech. Let's listen to part of what she said.
If you believe that we should say no to unfair trade deals, that we should stand up to China, that we should support our steel workers and auto workers and homegrown manufacturers, then join us.
So what do you think she means when she says that she is going to stand up to China?
Well, it's very interesting that Secretary Clinton actually still called her that way. It mentioned about the steel workers and the iron and steel industry inside the United States. As you may know, Arnold, as well as our other guests, this sector has been shrinking over decades in America. It is not the backbone of the U.S. industry, but rather innovation and climbing up the ladders have been the most important thing for U.S. manufacturing. Of course, she is trying to appeal to those who are concerned about the trade issues, doing China bashing, as many of the candidates over many years of elections have been doing about China. But one thing is very important, that now we're in a world that's going through its transformation, and politicians, whether it is in the United States or in China, has to realize that. I mean, look at the Secretary Clinton herself. She has successfully transformed herself in many ways. She was the Democratic hawk in a way when it comes to foreign policy after 9/11. She has become later the most traveled, the most communicatable as Secretary of State since she was serving for the White House. And now probably she needs to transform herself again to recognize all the latest trends in the world, while at the same time appealing to the domestic voters. I think that's one of the most important transformations she has to do, and also the United States has to do.
Stanislav, Hillary Clinton told the convention that she is ready to tackle one of the other big problems that the world is facing right now, and that is ISIL in the Middle East. Let's listen to what she said about that.
I've laid out my strategy for defeating ISIS. We will strike their sanctuaries from the air and support local forces taking them out on the ground. We will surge our intelligence so we detect and prevent attacks before they happen. We will disrupt their efforts online to reach and radicalize young people in our country. It won't be easy or quick, but make no mistake, we will prevail.
Stanislav, is there anything new you heard in that? Isn't that what the United States is doing already? Do you think, on the other hand, that she will expand U.S. involvement in Syria and in Iraq, for that matter?
Yeah, you are absolutely right that what she has just said is what the United States has been doing since the Desert Storm, I should say, since the beginning of the 90s in the Middle East, in the former Yugoslavia, and so on and so forth. If you don't like the guys or the leader of this or that country, you have to bomb them and bring them democracy through humanitarian intervention through bombing, through arming opposition inside this or that country, and actually it simply doesn't work. If they want to restore peace, they should rely on at least on the officially elected and internationally recognized government in Syria and elsewhere. But if they do not rely on the official government, they, I think if she is elected president, they will go on arming the so-called moderate rebels. And as we can see, moderate rebels are sometimes not as moderate as they are presented by Hillary Clinton on the one hand. On the other hand, sometimes they surrender their arms to ISIL. And in this case, I think this foreign policy is absolutely wrong. But if we imagine that maybe the main goal of the U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East is not to bring peace, but to bring chaos or some kind of chaotic situation, in this case, her foreign policy is quite right because it works for this very goal.
Joanne, Hillary has been First Lady. She's, of course, been Secretary of State. She is known around the world. She's not a new figure to people around the world. Has her time as Secretary of State given us any indication of how she would conduct her foreign policy?
I think it's given us a good roadmap of how she will conduct herself. I have to disagree a little bit with your prior guest on sort of what America's policy is, or what has been called Hillary Clinton's policy about bombing, and that is certainly not America's policy. And I would also ask these guests about if you don't like Hillary Clinton, what are you going to get with Donald Trump, who is sort of. We have no idea with his strongman talk what he's going to do.
How about nobody bombing these places?
Well, nobody bombing these places would be good, but that's obviously not the policy she was advocating as Secretary of State. What I think we will get from her is a lot more nuance in terms of having built all the relationships she's built around the world. In a way, we're getting, if she were to win the presidency, we would get someone we had never seen before, not even Barack Obama, not even her husband, Bill Clinton. Right. She will be able to hit the ground running on foreign policy on the first day because she already has these relationships built. And I think that can only be a positive thing in terms of how American foreign policy moves forward.
And in terms of that, and you say a more nuanced foreign policy, and if you look at Thursday night's part of the convention, her speech was preceded by a man called John Allen, who is a retired U.S. military general. Among other things, this is what he said. Let's watch.
From the battlefield to the capitals of our allies and friends and partners, the free people of the world look to America as the last best hope for peace and liberty for all humankind.
Now, one could be mistaken for thinking that was a rally at a George Bush convention.
Some people have said that. They talked about it. Was it a George Bush convention? Was it a Ronald Reagan convention? I have to imagine that one of the reasons for having all those former military people on stage was to counterbalance sort of the lack of policy, lack of focus that we're seeing on the Trump campaign. But it was interesting to see that many people on stage.
Right. Abdel Bari Atwan, there we have John Allen, who would have us believe that what he refers to as the free people of the world look to America as the last best hope for peace, liberty for all mankind. Is that how the world perceives the United States?
Well, actually, that's what the world is hoping the United States to do. But, look at the track record of the American administration's policies in the Middle East in particular. It is a legacy of war, actually. It is not a policy of intervention. They never achieved any peace in that part of the world. They created at least 5 failed states in that part of the world. Hundreds of thousands of people were killed, whether in Iraq, in Yemen, in Syria, and in Libya, because of these actually military interventions. So the problem is, yes, we love the United States to be actually a police, the one who side with peace. Look at the Arab-Israeli conflict, for example. Obama invested a lot of efforts there, but what's the outcome? It's completely zero, nothing at all. He never managed to stop a single Israeli settlement in that part of the world. He never actually managed to create the Palestinian independent state he promised the Palestinian people that he will achieve. And the same thing in Libya, for example. Libya now, after the American intervention, is a failed state. It is actually that Al-Qaeda, the Islamic State, managed to actually establish their bases there. The same thing in Iraq. Look at Iraq after 13 years of the American intervention, military intervention there. It is a chaos. It is a bloodshed. It is actually militias, bloody militias, car bombs. So yes, they are talking about peace, but we don't have peace in that part of the world. We have wars. This is the problem. We thought maybe that George W. Bush will be the last American who will actually intervene in that part of the world, and the other American will rectify it. I'm afraid, Hillary Clinton, who actually criticized Obama not intervening in Syria, not sending his B-52 to bomb Syria, she actually could be the president. Is she going to repeat the same legacy of George Bush under the Making America Great, for example? Is she going to bomb Syria and Iraq and Libya again simply because she threatened to root out, Islamic State or ISIS from that part of the world? We don't know yet, but we are really scared at that part of the world. The choice is between hawkish Hillary Clinton or actually, Trump, who is actually banging the drums of war and saying, I want to make America great and I want to intervene here, I want to bash here. So this is the problem. Honestly, I'm not confident that it will be a peaceful policies or peace on the world and also in the Middle East in particular.
Okay, Tian Wei, I know this is a tough question, but whom do you think the Chinese would prefer to become president in the United States?
It is a tough question. You know how to ask a tough question, I'm afraid. But the thing is, on the one hand, people were surprised by the level of temperament by one of those could become a presidential candidate, Donald Trump. On the other hand, the Chinese people, many of them are not necessarily feel very close to what the foreign policies were when Secretary Clinton was serving for the White House. One thing is very interesting now. We've seen the two countries, the United States and China, under the Democratic leadership over the past 8 years, not necessarily going ever closer toward one another, even though it is extremely important. For example, you got the South China Sea. Some people describe it as a proxy conflict between China and United States. Whether you believe it or not, that's one issue. However, you do see things are boiling over there, despite of the fact there has been a communique between China and ASEAN countries over the past few days, which is helpful. On the other hand, you also see the Korean Peninsula. The crisis is still going on, not decreasing, but rather increasing, I'm afraid, as a result of the so-called strategic patience diplomacy as subscribed by Secretary Clinton when she was in the office. But see things, where is it going? And thirdly, you also see a lot of the things between China and the United States bilaterally. The two countries are talking about major power relations. But exactly what is the contents of the major power relations? Over the past 8 years, we haven't seen new development that much coming from the White House. And will another Democrat coming into the White House really solve the problem? We don't know that answer. But on the other hand, will a Republican such as Donald Trump going to do a better job? We're not about that. We're not sure about that either, I'm afraid.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there. Tian Wei in Beijing, Stanislav Byshok in Moscow, Abdel Bari Atwan in London, and Joanne Bamberger with me here in the studio. Thanks to all of you for joining us.